say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red blare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order! Halt! Colors. Colors turn. Halt!
Good morning. Please be seated. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tampa. My name is Alyssa Wyckoff. I'm Senior Vice President, National Conference Services. Yes, I am the one sending you all the emails. It's nice to see that you all read them and you were here promptly at 8:45 this morning, so thank you very much. Yes, you get a round of applause for that. I have a few administrative announcements to make, and then we're going to get the program rolling this morning. First off, there is a slight change to a breakout session for this afternoon. The insider threat session in room 21 that was marked government only on the app and on the addendum and in the program guide is now open to all attendees. So if you really wanted to go to that session and originally were not permitted to, you may now go to that session. In addition, just a few reminders. The mobile app is available to download if you have an iPhone. Sorry, if you have an Android. Hopefully, the workaround I sent you all last night has been working. You're going to get a web-based version of the app. You're still going to get the same information. You should be able to see the notifications. We're working with Guidebook to hopefully get the app back up and running on the Google Play Store, so I do apologize for any inconvenience, but hopefully the workaround is good and you can all still access the app. The app is going to be your most up-to-date version of the agenda. We are also keeping the NCSI website, the DoDIIS website, up to date, so you can check either place. And you all should have received an addendum at registration. There's been a lot of changes thanks to some of the things in the news. So please double check the addendum and the app before choosing what sessions you want to attend for the rest of the week. In addition, there is a social this evening. You were all told about at registration, the All Hands on Deck Networking Social. Please be sure to bring your ticket that you received at registration. That is your entry into the social. It's at American Social right across the bridge over by the Westin, and we hope to see you all there this evening. Finally, please make sure to take some time to go to the exhibit hall. We have well over 200 companies up there, our largest exhibit hall since 2012, so please take some time to go up there, visit with the vendors, check out their cool tech, spend some time. We've allotted a lot of time in the agenda for you to be able to do that. If at any time you have any questions, you guys can always find me, go to the registration desk, we're all here to help. So thank you very much and have a great conference.
nation is at a crossroads. The threats we face evolving. The competitive military advantage we've had eroding. The operational environment has shifted, and the ability to develop asymmetric capabilities is paramount. The technology that we provide will be the lethality we need on the battlefield. The world is continuously changing, and the global competition we face is quickly maturing. We must meet our asymmetric challenges head-on and with increased speed to mission. By being resilient in the face of current and evolving threats, being redundant in our ability to continue the mission in any operating environment, and above all, by securing our assets from malicious intrusions. We cannot rely on the status quo. We must respond. The arena of warfare has changed. It's shifted from terrestrial to cyber. It's time for us to create new advantages, to utilize every innovation and drive technological supremacy, whether that be through big data analytics, artificial intelligence, or robotics, to engage in current and future conflicts. America is a target, whether from terrorists seeking to attack our way of life, malicious cyber activity against our infrastructure, or political and information subversion. We must initiate a response and execute against the challenges presented. We cannot do this alone. We must stand shoulder to shoulder with our allied partners and vendor community in order to protect our way of life. The threats we face are universal and the landscape is constantly shifting, yet together we can do something about it. We must be resilient, committed, and focused on every potential opportunity. This is our advantage: to meet these challenges, respond to the threats, shield and protect against our adversaries. This is why we're here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2019 DoDIIS Worldwide Conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Chief Information Officer of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Mr. Jack Gumtow.
Good morning. Just real quick, yesterday when I saw this video and we were running through the preps on that, I was pretty impressed with that, and more so impressed because usually NCSI generates that for us. This year we did it in-house. They did a phenomenal job. So thank you. So once again, good morning and welcome to Tampa for the start of the 2019 DoDIIS Worldwide Conference. For those that don't know me, I'm Jack Gumtow. I'm the DIA CIO. This conference, it marks my second as the CIO, and it's a tremendous honor that I get to host this conference, which is the largest IT conference in the Intel community. I want to thank the City of Tampa, the Tampa Convention Center, and the Tampa Bay Police Department for their support. I can't overstate how important it is to have these kind of partners when we organize an event of this magnitude. I also want to express my appreciation to my boss, DIA Director Lieutenant General Bob Ashley, for his continued support. And that support, it stems from a deep understanding of the value proposition that this conference provides both to DIA and to you as our partners. Sir, thank you. I also want to express my sincere appreciation to Ms. Caitlin Ostrowski and the East Lake High School Performing Arts Academy for this morning's national anthem. I think she's gone, but yeah, thank you. As a high school student, she did a phenomenal, as an individual, she did a phenomenal job, let alone she's in high school standing in front of this crowd, bringing me to that this is our second largest conference in 14 or 16 years. And as of this morning, we had about 3,700 people in attendance. So it's fairly large. So let me give you a little background on what we have in store for you over the next few days. We have an agenda that offers distinguished lineup of military and government experts and industry leaders to provide insights on a variety of relevant topics. Our goal is to generate conversations surrounding the collective set of issues that we are facing as we continue our digital journey and our digital evolution. I have no doubt our speakers will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience, which will create a rewarding 3 days. This brings me to this year's conference theme: resiliency, redundancy, and security, adapting to asymmetric threats. Everything is digitally connected, and everything is vulnerable and exploitable. And at the same time, it offers us numerous opportunities. Collectively, we must be prepared to rapidly adapt to the demands of the changing strategic and tactical digital environment. Over the course of the next 3 days, we have a unique opportunity to network face-to-face and access innovative technologies. To this end, we have designed a lineup of breakout sessions led by a variety of government and industry experts. If you'd been to the DoDIIS conference previously, you understand that the intrinsic value of being here is the ability to capitalize on the direct engagement with subject matter experts. Please take advantage of these opportunities. So where is DIA heading, and how is the DIA-CIO addressing the goals of the agency, the IC, and DoD? Within the CIO, there's an undeniable need to enhance our capabilities and become an all-encompassing, data-centric, information and communications technology service provider for our partners. To achieve this end state, we have embarked on a deliberate process to crystallize our vision, objectives, and the means to achieve the collective goals of DIA, the IC, and DoD. This effort is underway, and I call it the DIA-CIO modernization. To do this, we established the CIO vision. It's published. We followed that with the DIA-CIO strategy, outlining 4 goals and 19 objectives. This document is published, and it's available at the DI booth in the exhibit hall. It's an unclassified document. We are close to publishing an annual DIA-CIO planning guidance, which outlines where we are prioritizing our investments, where we are disinvesting in order to generate capacity and resources, and to achieve the goals and objectives laid out in the strategy. The approach we're taking allows us to shift towards being an enabling mission and business partner, while focusing on what we do well and allowing our partners the latitude to rapidly move forward using our foundational capabilities. I don't believe my CIO organization can function unilaterally or can own all aspects of the IT stack, which heretofore has been the predominant view. Rather, we are focusing on our core strengths in transport, infrastructure, and platform services, while jointly developing applications with our partners. It's okay if our others build capabilities, as long as they are building them on our foundational core we're providing and use the standards and guidance we are publishing. And more on that in just a moment. At the top of my stack, up on the screen, are analytics and visualization. I see that as our partner's responsibility. Why is it theirs? That's a great question. It's because I don't live in those spaces. I don't live in those mission spaces. And when we have attempted to deliver at that layer, we end up delivering pizza when what they really wanted was beer. We will be there to help. But what I am doing today is setting the stage for our partners to be able to easily do this on their own. I've empowered my CTO to stand up a technical leadership council to develop technical standards, guidance, and strategic technical direction. These are routinely published and made available to the community at large. I encourage you to meet with my CTO to discuss these standards as they impact everyone that interacts with DIA, the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, from an IT perspective. So to achieve the goals I've listed and to ensure we meet mission requirements, I need your help. I need increased collaboration and transparency with our partners, paying special attention to providing foundational services ahead of demand. I need proactive collaboration with our partners so we can align their requirements with emerging technologies, determine our key investment areas, and as importantly, identify areas where I can take risk. We need to enhance and support our foundational environment so that our partners can build and deploy capabilities at mission-mandated speeds, not at bureaucracy speeds, and provide connectivity to our partners that's not limited by the constraints of geography or a desk. DIA-CIO is changing. We're focusing on partner support and partner service. This is a journey. We're moving forward and are actively implementing the tenets that I've spoken about. I need you, as my partners and my colleagues, to help me and therefore help our collective communities achieve mission success. At this time, I'm happy to welcome my boss, DIA's 21st Director, Lieutenant General Bob Ashley. I think you're going to find that he is engaging, grounded, and pragmatic. And if you have an opportunity to engage him offline, I think you're going to discover that he's a pretty good musician as well. Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack, I want pizza and beer. It's not enough just to have one. Hey, I just wanted to point out also that as you saw those senior non-commissioned officers walking off the stage, Caitlin was in step. So that was well done. I have this urge to turn around and see how my hair is. It doesn't work. It just shows the bald spot. Hey, thanks for coming out today. This is incredibly important, and excuse me if I cough a little bit. Saturday morning I landed back from Afghanistan. I'm still getting the dust out of my throat. I would like to point out that we have the 20th Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency sitting in row 3, and you also have the former CENTCOM J2, and they look incredibly rested now that they've gone into retirement, although I think Vince and Mark are both staying pretty busy. Dimitri, you look tired, buddy. Got the CENTCOM J2 in the front row with us, and so I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, and thanks for spending time with us. So thanks for being here. Thanks for the CIO. Thanks for the Tampa community, everybody that brings this community together, and we talk about the challenges we have to face, and it's kind of good timing that even though Saturday morning I literally just got off a plane from Afghanistan, as we started the session, it was very illustrative of one of our challenges. And I'm not a technologist, but for some reason Samsung and Apple don't talk to one another. That's a huge issue. And so one of the things I would ask you to think about is the idea of interoperability as we go through the next couple of days. Because everybody that's sitting in this audience that represents a unique industry capability, you got to be able to talk to each other. You have got to be able to talk to each other. So as Jack has laid out, it's a good time to engage, meet somebody, don't go with your normal circle of friends, expand that out a little bit. And how do we create new solutions? You know, in my talking points, we highlighted the fact that things like Post-it, super glue, and duct tape were not built by design. They were built by mistake. They were accidents. They were opportunities to leverage a capability, but that's not where they started. And so we have to think about how we innovate. And I am thoroughly convinced that there is nobody that innovates like America. And I saw that in the field with our special operators, with industry, with the guys teaming with the task force when I just left Bagram a couple of days ago. Data interoperability. So with all the unique capabilities, the designs that you bring to the Department of Defense, everything has to talk to everything else. Otherwise, we will be sub-optimized and we will miss opportunities. And the opportunities that are presenting to us in terms of technology, many of those are dual use and they come with threats. In some cases, things that we may not have anticipated. So a little bit of a spoiler, this week is As Jack said, it's about redundancy, it's about resiliency, it's about security, it's about how we move data. And it is complicated. And in many ways, we can solve problems, and we can solve problems at speed. Our challenge is to solve the problem at scale. I can come up with a unique capability for a battalion, a brigade, where they can operate at speed within that brigade, but can they talk to every other brigade? Can they talk to other services? Can they talk to other nations? I don't know that we have as much a speed problem as we have a scale problem. And buried within that scale problem is the challenge of interoperability. And data is one of the fastest growing industries, and it has a laser focus of a couple of our key competitors, both China and Russia. And if you've not seen the defense white paper that China just published, I'd ask you to take a look at that. They realize the understanding of their ability to leverage data is part of what it means to be a great power. And Putin has been on record to say that really the people that can leverage and understand that will dominate. And information is how China plans to dominate in the future. That is their strategy. That is their strategy to get behind decision advantage. And so just think about all the information that's out there. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created every day. In a market that's going to go over 100 billion by 2022. And so I think about that in context. And I go back to 1993. So 1993, Barbara and I are walking into Circuit City. Young captain, 2 kids, not a lot of money. And so we're looking at the Dell computer. And the debate we're having is whether we get the 4 or the 8 meg hard drive, because I'm not sure we'll ever fill up the 8 meg hard drive. And that thing was still like $1,200. We did go with the 8 meg hard drive. I can create a single PowerPoint slide now that's 8 megs. But just think about the technology and everything that we see between smart houses and everything that can control your life. And then look at the context of a smart city, a safe city that China is building on a global scale for what could be a safe city, better regulation. How do you do industrial control systems? How do you regulate the lights, infrastructure, industrial systems, or smart cities for how you can tag virtually everybody that's walking on the street? And where is that data going? And who's controlling it? So it's not just about the Internet of Things for consumers, it's other risks that lie out there in data and our inability to leverage it. Terrorist networks, misinformation, deep fakes, confusion, distrust in institutions. And then what's our job? As a combat support agency, we have to supply the warfighters with information that is accurate and that is trusted in an environment where misinformation exists. So how do we find that relevant information? How do we find accurate information? And as Neil Wiley says, it's that secret sauce, our ability to take publicly available information and integrate it with the pristine collection that we have. But as Jack alluded to, we have to do it at speed. It has to be fast enough to be actionable. And the policy that underpins the process that allows you to integrate that into our systems in so many ways, and I saw this in Afghanistan over the last week, are industrial policies that are not informed by the requirements of a digital age, but we're working our way through that. Challenges with acquisition, how do we address risk, as Jack talked about, and how do we mitigate that risk? How do we take a commercial application and integrate it in near real time and update it without having to go through this laborious process to bring it on our networks? So if you ask me my vision to kind of complement what Jack has already talked about, it's the workforce, it's highly professional individuals, it's leading edge technology and how we discover information, how we create knowledge, how we provide warning and identify opportunities so that we can overwhelmingly have an advantage of our adversaries for our warfighters and our policymakers. And there's a lot of things in that to unpack. So it means an analyst that can work through large data can see connections in minutes that used to take us hours to days. It means leveraging constantly emerging tools, and this is part of what we saw with the task force in theater, the ability to leverage tools in real time that are being built and bring them into the network. And to be able to take that data with a degree of trust and risk mitigation and move it from unclassified to a collateral to a TS, to enrich that analysis, extract insights, and then move it back down, because your ability to share with a partner, a coalition partner, may not be on a classified, but it has to be on a secure network. Those are challenges that we have. When you design this technology, and I saw some of this over the past week, I would ask you to take the words proprietary and no foreign out of your lexicon. We cannot do that. We have got to be able to share with our allies and partners. If you go back to the National Defense Strategy, that is a line of effort too. It is allies and partners. The door is open for us to push hard on our ability to share. Let me give you a good example, and it dates back to 1941. So there's 2 Navy and 2 Army officers that work cryptology, and they jump on a ship and they're headed to the UK. They have solved Purple. They have solved the Japanese diplomatic communications. They have broken it, and it's something the Brits have been working on. So they arrive. The Brits have broken Enigma. They've broken the German communications. But Churchill has given them guidance that you will not share that information. But the U.S. comes forward and says, hey, we've broken Purple. I know you guys have been working on it. This is how it worked. And the guy that's the head of the Secret Intelligence Service, Stuart Menzies, which if you're a James Bond fan, you would recognize him as M, although his moniker is actually C, which stands for Chief. So they have the conversation. The Americans say, we've broken Purple. Menzies sends a note to Churchill and says, can we share Enigma? Churchill says, do it. It should not take an act of war or the Prime Minister to get the authority to share that information. What was the outcome? It was estimated that our understanding of both Purple and Enigma codes probably shortened the war by 2 years. But we have to do that now. That's the framework and mindset that we've got to take for our senior leaders, our decision makers, is why are you waiting for the first shot to be fired? And we can start building those insights. And those insights are not just about during a conflict, it's about deterring a conflict. So for our focus, there's 3 key areas to talk about. Open source intelligence, our machine-assisted analytic rapid repository system, or MARS, which I think everybody's heard about, and obviously the flagship communications program we have, JWICS. And it's very important that when we talk about open source intelligence, we set that aside from publicly available information. That is an outcome of PAI, because if you're a logistician, you want publicly available information. If you're a planner, if you're an admin, you name it. And for too long, I think we've conflated the 2 of those together. And for us on the OSINT forum, it means we've got to be able to understand how to collect and process that. And so we made the decision this year that is an additive career field that we're going to build at DIA, to understand how to collect and process that information, because we've kind of made it a pickup game, more ad hoc for other specialties over the last few years, and we can no longer do that. As far as large, complex data sets, DIA has been doing that for a couple of decades, but they're not all in the same place. They do not all talk to one another, and we've got to fix that. We've got to figure out how we aggregate information together. And it gets back to the core of why this agency exists, is to provide foundational intelligence on foreign militaries and the operational environment. And since it is football season, my rough analogy is this is the scouting report on the team you're going to play. And we update the scouting report every single day. And not only that, we're going to tell you the good restaurants to go, where to avoid traffic, as we tell you about the operational environment. Best way to describe it is a vision as we create the best that we can to replicate a virtual model of our adversaries and our competitors. And Mars is our attempt to start building that baseline. It is not MIDB. It is not the modern integrated database. It is an information environment. It is dynamic, and we cannot build it without you. So think about the Arab Spring. And this is kind of where big data comes in, and what was taking place in the northern tiers of Africa. The communication that was taking place, the revolutionary conversations, the protests, everything that was involving the conditions. And the IC saw those conditions, but from an indications and warning standpoint, we didn't necessarily see the when this was going to all kick off. And when I think about that, I think about conversations I've had with senior leaders about August of 1914, the guns of August. If we had Mars, if we had big data, if we had AI, ML, and everything that we had now, would we have walked into World War I? It's a question I can't answer. But imagine, as the Arab Spring kicked off, if you were the CENTCOM J2, what was possible to know? What insights might you have had to see what was about to evolve, that was sparked by Mohamed Bouazizi, the Tunisian vegetable vendor that engaged in an act of self-immolation? And I asked that question because when the Arab Spring unfolded, I was that CENTCOM J2. But with all the data, all the stuff that comes out, there is also a big piece of this that speaks to traditional analysis and good tradecraft, because you can't just say, the box told me the following. And so we're already working our way through that and building analytic data teams where we take a tool developer, a methodologist, an all-source analyst, and a data scientist, and we kludge them together to look at how we deal with information. And then we train those algorithms with good tradecraft, where I can tell you I have a high probability, because of the way I've trained that algorithm, that what I am telling you is accurate. And then the last piece is JWICS, our flagship for how we communicate. And we have to do this, and it has to be resilient, it has to be redundant, and it has to be secure. More importantly, it's going to have to increase in capacity. We're going to have to make sure that we get the funding, that it stays cutting edge, and that we're able to have high-speed links to deal with the volume of information that's coming in the future. And even as we talk about JWICS and those secure communications, we think about quantum encryption, quantum communications, and are we going toward a point where not only is it JWICS, but it's we're leveraging commercial networks in real time to be able to communicate with partners globally where those networks that the Defense Department builds do not exist. So that's the kind of innovation we have to think about. And think about the chairman's intent for global integration. And we have combatant commands represented here. That goes back to my scale issue. Because the tyranny of combatant command boundaries will not bound our adversaries, our competitors, in great power competition. And so we have to think about how we are interoperable across combatant commands, across the J2s in our core functions, and how we do foundational, how we do targeting, how we do collection management, how we bring in intel mission data to feed that F-35, how we do acquisition, and most importantly, across combatant commands, how do I do indications and warning? How do I optimize that? Because if I'm not interoperable with data and understanding and tools that speak to one another, I will be sub-optimized and I will miss something. And that's how we get to decision authority. And as you saw the quote from Eisenhower, and to share another comment from Neil Wiley, where he says, our job is to support Plan A. Plan A is diplomacy. But if Plan A fails, we've got to be ready to execute Plan B. And in great power competition, you got to bring your A game on day one, because if you don't, you may not get a day two. So we got to be postured to provide unparalleled support to those decision makers. And as Jack talked about, it's not just data, it's visualization, it's artificial intelligence, it's computer vision, it's machine learning. And those capabilities will evolve over time. And our competitors and adversaries are dedicating a great deal of time and effort to do that. So rather than have a conversation about who's ahead or who's behind, in the next decade, everybody's going to have it. So how are you going to operate in that space? Another quote from President Eisenhower, he said, the only way to win World War III is to prevent it, which for us is how do we create that knowledge, how do we create situational understanding, and how do we create decision advantage for our leaders? Because while they're working on warfighting concepts, their expectation is we are solving these problems. So let me close with one last quote from Churchill, and I think it's illustrative of a phrase that everybody always says that, you go back to Clausewitz on the fog and friction of war, or no good plan ever survives first contact. And the reason this is so important, I think it's illustrative of what Churchill said, was never, never, never believe any war will be smooth and easy, or that anyone who embarks on this strange voyage can measure the tides and hurricanes he will encounter. The statesman who yields to war fever must realize that once the signal is given, he is no longer the master of policy, but the slave of unforeseeable and uncontrollable events. That is the fog and friction of war. That is miscalculation. That is unknowable red lines. So our goal is that unforeseeable and uncontrollable dynamics, that fog and friction, will never be completely eliminated, but we have a chance to reduce it. And we have a chance to reduce it by what we will discuss over the course of the next few days. And so I look for your engagement. I thank you for your support. We have significant issues we got to work through, because even as we speak right now, there are soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians that are in harm's way, and they are operating in a sub-optimized way because there are problems that we need to solve. And with that, I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks. All right. So last year we took a different approach to this conference opening session, and rather than me standing up and speaking for 30 minutes or so, and the general standing up here speaking for 30 minutes or so, we did what we just did, and then went into a town hall. This was, I thought it was well received based on the feedback we saw, and so we're going to continue it again this year. The point here is how do we do from a town hall and address the pressing questions that you have, rather than just telling you what we think. In many cases on the town hall, it's much better to hear from the audience. What is it that's on your mind, and then let us address it. So that's what we're going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to make an introduction of this year's MC, and who the individual that'll be facilitating this session. There it is. This is Sumo Doug, but really, this is my deputy CIO, Doug Cossa. And Doug, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Should be on. Yes. Jack, thank you for that flattering introduction. What you guys don't know about Jack is that he tends to live in the moment and has forgotten that I'm about to start a Q&A session with him and the director. And to shed a little light on the director, he, for those of you who have briefed him, asked some pretty tough questions. Questions to where you really need access to Wikipedia right in front of you to answer. So when I was asked to moderate this question and answer panel with the two of them, I enthusiastically said, absolutely. So, we're going to get started with one simple question. 2 trains are leaving the station at 45 miles an hour. No, just kidding. We're not going to start there. Actually, as Jack said, we're going to take questions from you guys, the audience. You can email your questions to askdodis@gmail.com, and I'll read them up here. Hopefully that will go smoothly. I know it will. And the director and Jack will answer accordingly. But I'd like to start off with a first question that we have, and this is for General Ashley. You have been leading DIA for nearly 2 years now. Can you talk about the role that technology plays as part of the agency's mission?
All right, thanks, Doug. You guys hear me? Am I on? So that's really what I gave you over the last 30 minutes, and the role of technology. And we did an interview, I think about a month ago, and one of the ways I qualified Mars is that's our moonshot. And we've got to be able to leverage information. It's not just really in the analytics side, it's everything we do. It's every commodity area we have, whether it's administrative back office services, but really that flagship capability is how we take information at speed and scale and then allow analysts to think, to work their way through problems so that they're not doing these repetitive things, they're not engaged in laborious research, that the information comes to them, we're able to visualize it and present it in such a way that they can see those relationships in many cases that would not necessarily be evident to them, and then they can start working at solving problems and engaging in dialogue with senior leaders and having a much more robust conversation about the problem at hand as opposed to figuring out how the mechanics of just doing basic research.
So Jack, we heard about the director speak of the importance of technology to support DIA's mission. Can you discuss some of the emerging trends that we're seeing?
Okay, let me address it from this vantage. And I want to talk from General Ashley's speech that he talked about. And the reality is we can have technological advancements across the board, but the underpinning of this is about data. So without data, you have a set of tools that I'm not sure what the real value proposition is. So data is the common denominator that we must get straight. We're not there yet. Data is hard. It comes in at speed, at the volume, the veracity. We're working on it. We're all working on that, but we don't quite have that fully harnessed yet. But then when you go up that layer, there's a number of technical advances. So AI, ML, we all hear about it. I personally think that's still on the hype curve of, we haven't quite got to the valley of disillusionment yet. But I don't see AI, it's a few years out to what we actually think AI is. Narrow AI is certainly available. It's things that are underpinning Mars. It's other technical tools that we've done, including Redline and Cossa, that allow us to look at large volumes of data and discern those patterns in there so that the analyst, instead of looking at the entire haystack, is looking at the small pitchfork of hay that's available to them, and make assessments, automated assessments, that allow us to move this mission forward. So there's things coming. But I don't want to dismiss or minimize the point that the data is really key here.
Which gets back to cloud infrastructure. And so let me put in a plug for Mr. Deasy and the CIO of the Defense Department. Things like JEDI. You know, that data, that interoperability to be able to move information and to be able to discover information, we've got to have a cloud architecture that allows us to do that. And again, not a technologist, but the way he kind of described it in a conversation I had with him is, you know, because I was just saying, do you have this big Uber cloud or is it multiple clouds? And it is actually multiple clouds. But the way he described it is you have clouds that are application aware, which is to say, if I have a question on a topic, I don't need to send it to 6 different locations. I just need to send it once because the clouds are application aware and it goes across the clouds to aggregate that data and bring my response back. And that is incredibly powerful.
So we're having a few questions come in right now. As a reminder, askdodis@gmail.com. So one of those first questions that we have, and this is for General Ashley, will DIA place priority and focus on having other machine learning and artificial intelligence initiatives in addition to Mars?
So Mars is an overarching environment. It will have, again, Jack said AI is not quite there, it's really machine learning. There will be multiple machine learning applications that will be able to ride on the data that Mars will ingest. So think of an app store that has a multitude of different kinds of machine learning applications that can be applied against the data that we have. So it's not any one ML, it's not any one computer vision or any one AI tool. What we want to be able to do is build a framework that has access to the information, and then we're looking for industry to be able to come in and innovate to how we are able to understand that data. And it goes back to what we talked about briefly with the analytic data teams. And we have those looking at a couple different problem sets. We're having them look at a problem set for China, we're having them look at a problem set for Iran and Russia. But it's taking the data and applying multiple tools against it, multiple machine learning, multiple computer vision. If you have to look at the problem you're trying to solve, then you have a menu of options for how you can solve that. And the ADTs gives us the opportunity for the analyst to go, I really need to be able to do this. And then you have the tool developer or the software developer or the data scientist goes, okay, I think I can write a script to manipulate the information. So when you go out and you buy Microsoft Word, you get what's over on Microsoft Word until the good people at Apple or Microsoft decide they're going to update that again. What we want to be able to do is, what if you could manipulate the functionality in Word in real time to do different things? And that's what we got to be able to do.
Thank you. So this one's for you, Jack. Another question from the audience here. When someone says DoDIIS desktop of the future, what do you think of?
I'm going to use a term from my fellow colleague, Elston Howard, who's sitting up here in the front shaking his head. But, and what we talk about is that single pane of glass. And I talked to you this morning about that as well. And General Parker is coming from the National Guard Bureau and had come from Stratcom and had been on COE, our current desktop environment. And said, man, I love COE, but being at the National Guard Bureau, it is very hard to communicate and interoperate with others because of the way the architecture is. So you shouldn't have multiple panes to go from, hey, I got to do something on this machine and then go over to this machine to do something else. Or even have to go in and say, hey, I got to go point my application at this data set or this repository to get that. It should be that single pane of glass that I go in and I have full interoperability across our partner community. And when I say partner community, I don't just mean the Defense Intelligence Enterprise. I mean everybody that operates within those domains, whatever those domains happen to be, inclusive of our foreign partners. That's what I see as the desktop, the DoDIIS. I don't want to call it the DoDIIS desktop of the future, but it needs to be that interoperability set that we all can operate interoperably at speed. You shouldn't even think about it.
Thank you. General Ashley, for you, what confidence do you need machines to give in their data analytics so that humans, analysts, can accept the results?
So I kind of alluded to that before. One of the programs we have is you have to have a high degree of confidence. Well, you need to be able to establish a confidence level. And so in this case, we've been able to do some work where we have a high level of confidence that we can characterize a particular thing that is happening because the algorithm has been trained in such a way. And so there's 9 attributes of tradecraft. And whether you're working in the digital world or the human world, we cannot walk away from those the rigor of tradecraft as we look at how we bring in data. And so part of training the algorithm is that you either have a low, medium confidence level that what you've assessed is in fact valid. And we've got to be able to provide that kind of assessment still to decision makers. You can't just say the box spit out the following response. You got to tell them what's the level of confidence, because built into that algorithm is training and background that underpins how it came up with that determination. And so we've got to be able to tell our senior leaders how we came about with that assessment. I think it will get better over time, but it's also going to get more complicated over time as we look at misinformation, deception, things like that. I had a conversation with General Kibbins several years ago, and somebody made the comment, it's going to be so easy to deceive people with deep fakes and everything else. And he goes, Yeah, but you look at the other aspect of that where people post things on social media, you have so much truth that is actually going to come out to controvert some of the deep fakes and other information like that. But for us, the real advantage is the fact that we're going to layer not only public available information, but we're going to take that pristine collection. So it really is about not a single source, it is about multiple sources and tradecraft that we apply in analytics that has underpinned what we've done for decades, and that's how we'll go forward. It's just we will start enabling a digital aspect of that to work at scale and speed.
So this next question we received from the audience deals with workforce and the challenges we have, and are both strategic challenges and priorities that we have in our agency strategic plan as well as CIOs. So the question is, what do you consider are the biggest challenges and opportunities to acquiring and retaining our talent?
So we're relooking training right now. Janice Glover-Jones, who is Jack's predecessor as our CIO, spent a year with Dell. And what she did is she was looking at bias in the workspace. She was looking at all kinds of different projects. She came back in about a month before she finished her year sabbatical and said, hey, I want you to read this article about AT&T. And it really is about how do you reskill the workforce to be able to operate in today's environment. And for us, it is taking those digital attributes, those capabilities and training, and injecting that into the workforce they have right now. So we're in the midst of Janice helping us scale that, and the task I've given to everybody that owns a career field is to look at skills and attributes in the digital world, what you need to sustain, and where there are gaps that we need to build toward. Because everything that we're talking about, I can't say, tell me about the analyst of 2025 or 2030, because really that skill set is needed now. And so we're going through all the career fields and looking at what big data, data analytics, all of that means to every one of those career fields. So Janice is helping work that with, and we're actually looking at recruiting across the combat support agencies. Bob Sharp, who's the National Geospatial Agency Director, had a great idea a couple months ago. He goes, we ought to really get all the organizations together and talk about training, recruiting, promotions, every aspect of human capital. And so our chiefs of staff, over the course of the last probably 60, 70 days, have been meeting to look at those exact issues. And part of it is retention of talent. You're not going to get rich, working for the government. But where we can, how do we incentivize, whether it's financial or other opportunities for credentialing, to be able to keep some of that talent on board. And the one thing is to present them with the unique challenges they will not necessarily find in other places, to be able to solve some hard problems for the government and for national security.
And even if, in Jack's view as your career field manager for IT, even if we lose those people after a period of time, I don't see it as a bad thing. It's because of that rotation into industry,
right,
into another agency, and they're still supporting the overall mission. And so a lot of people have still had this mindset, and I have them in the workforce, that really, I got to bring somebody in, it's going to be for a 30-year career. And with the new entrees into the workforce, that is not, their mindset is differently, and it's okay. I'm okay with that because they're contributing, they're moving on, and they're still contributing as they go through their career. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of starting to address some of that.
Yeah, and I agree with Jack. It's there's not a massive exodus, and for those that do leave, they take an understanding of our needs. Yeah. And they take those to industry to help us solve those problems. So the other thing is thinking about the models, and cyber is a good example of this, where cyber's been able to bring people in at a higher grade level, come in laterally to organizations, or to take a sabbatical and bring them back, or you work in industry for a couple of years and you come back in. So the traditional model, and I agree, you're locked in for the next 30 years is really not what this generation is looking for. And so we've got to adapt, those of us that are not digital natives, to be able to think creatively about career opportunities and not be risk averse to bringing people in and out of the IC.
So this question was pointed to the director, but Jack, I think this applies to a number of our efforts in CIO as well. So during our conversations with allies abroad, how much importance would you place on advancing our technological capabilities?
Great question.
Yeah, so let me jump on this one first, because one of the things we're doing right now is with Mars. And so we have John Howard, who's our Deputy Director for Commonwealth Integration from New Zealand. And John is an absolute zealot. There's nothing better than having someone with a different uniform go into an office with a bunch of US people and shame them for not sharing. Which goes back to my comments of why are we waiting for the first shot to be fired? This is about building muscle memory and having situational understanding and deterrence before we go to conflict. So when I was just in Afghanistan, there was a particular capability that the task force is working on, and it's great, but there's some hiccups, and they're working on it. Oh, by the way, it's no foreign. So there is already an impediment to that start. So as we think about Mars, what we've done with some of our closest partners, and John's a big part of this, is I said, look, I can't send you the PowerPoint slides or talk to you about it. I need to bring you in at the engineering level. And so as we look at the basic tenets and the foundation of Mars to some of our closest partners, what we've done is we've said, this is how this is going to operate. What do you have in your infrastructure now? I need to share some basic information, some data with you so that you can start working at the engineering level. Oh, by the way, all those machine learning apps, other things, you may have a better mousetrap than the one that I'm working on. And so what we've got to really do with our partners and allies is not deliver a system to them that we can share, but to bring them in at the engineering level.
So for those that know me, I'm pretty passionate about the work that we do with the Five Eyes community. I've been doing that for, I don't know, to a large degree for about 5 years, pretty heavily. To the point where because I see the value proposition because we don't fight as an individual nation. We fight as a coalition of warriors wherever that happens to be. We work together as that coalition. I can't even separate that from my being. So one of the things I had to do when General Ashley put me in this job last year was sign as the original classification authority for the JWICS classification, security classification guide. And I went through that thing, and it was very long, and it was 1990-ish discussion. I said, I'm not signing that. I went through the whole thing. I redlined it. I mean, it was Chris Revere is in the audience somewhere who did that for me. And he can attest to the amount of changes that I had. To the end result of that is a major rewrite of the JWICS security classification guide. And to wit, I took out no foreign almost exclusively in that document. It is now a releasable document. It talks about being releasable to our partners because that's how it is. And my litmus test on that was pretty simple. If our partners, I'm going to use Major General John Howard, who's sitting here in the front row as an example. So if our Kiwi partners find out that we have a problem on a JWICS node somewhere, have we compromised national security? Guess what? We didn't. They're our partners. Well, that instantly makes that rel. It's just a mindset change that we all have to adopt, that we're not in this little bubble ourselves. We have to work in these partner coalitions, and it just plain out makes sense.
So another question we have deals with cloud computing becoming the new norm in the private and commercial sector. So the question is, how are we aligning ourselves to better integrate with them from a government standpoint?
I'll let you take that one.
All right. So I think everybody's pretty aware when Stephanie O'Sullivan was the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence a few years back, and General Clapper was the Director of National Intelligence, we stood up a thing called EyeSight. And I'm not going to talk a lot about it because John Sherman's going to speak to EyeSight and EPIC 2 and where we're going with that. But back then, the intent was, cloud was generally a new concept for the government, at least. Maybe not so much in the private sector. And it was, hey, you have to be all in. Everything must go into the cloud. We have grown in our knowledge since then. We've learned a lot about what that means, what it doesn't mean, where the value proposition and how well it's going to work in some places and others. You can't be all in right now. Simply because physics sometimes gets in the way. That said, what we've done in the past is we said, is it technically feasible to put something in the cloud? Check, yeah. because we can pretty much put anything in the cloud, right, where that stands now. What I've implemented at CIO is said there's 2 more criteria that you have to check off. One is, does it make a functional mission impact, or are we detracting from that? Check or minus. And the last one is cost, because when you put something in the cloud, I end up with a fixed cost I must pay. And so you have to do a business cost analysis to say, does it make financial sense to go there? Or can you do it a different way? And so that's kind of where we're at looking at that. There's multiple technologies coming in. You know, as everybody is aware, I'm not saying anything new, C2S, the commercial cloud services run by Amazon, is on our TS environment. Microsoft is standing up Azure on the TS environment coming up. We're using various clouds in different levels. Danny Deasy, as the DoD CIO, is bringing in JEDI, bringing in cloud computing to the DoD writ large on all the different domains. What we're doing is, to me, it's an ecosystem. I don't care if it's a Microsoft, IBM, Google, what have you. And as the General Ashley talked about, the interoperability amongst them, or as we saw this morning with the iPhone and the Samsung, that the application, or we got to get past that so I can use the entire ecosystem. I'll give you an example, and then I'll shut up. So in the Intel community, we have essentially 2 clouds on the high side. We have C2S, which is a commercial cloud service provider, and then we have NSA provides government, the GovCloud. What I want to do, and what I've said for years I want to do, even though I got some pushback over time from that, and there's some people in here that have heard some of that pushback, was I want to use the ecosystem. I want to develop capabilities on OnClass. I want to get data from the PAI data and move that. I want to run analytics in the cloud that NSA provides, because it's a data analytics cloud. And I want to do the compute and the visualization in the commercial cloud. So then you end up with this ecosystem that is using best of breed of those things, that is fully interoperable, so that we provide the best capability, the best answer to our policymakers and our warfighters, so we're doing things at speed.
I just wanted to point out they just changed the screen here, because initially we had 95 hours left. Now it's it's only 5 minutes. Thank God. I didn't need more water.
Somebody's got a 5-hour energy drink for me?
There you go.
All right. Well, we're going to take one more question with that 5 minutes remaining. So the last question deals with our strategy and prioritization. We've been discussing that a lot on the stage during our opening remarks. How are we partnering with Congress to keep them engaged with DIIS developments?
So I'll start that one. It is, so we're pushing out an open door, and they are very helpful, but there's an education process behind that. So we take every opportunity we can to go and talk to them about every initiative that we have. And the successes, which, a lot of them in the classified realm of how we've leveraged machine learning, machine learning, computer vision. But we've gone up there countless times with staffers and members to talk to them about Mars and JWICS specifically, to make sure that we're able to get their support, to understand where the program's going, that they don't have any questions. And for JWICS, the big thing I've asked Jack and the guys to push on is to bring the staffers and members to DIE headquarters to go down to the basement and take a look at, I don't want to say the state of disrepair, but we are challenged to be able to upgrade that. So we cannot afford to take marks against the program, given we're kind of keeping it alive right now. We want to make sure that we get it really, really healthy. So there's constant dialogue. On any given week, we are on the Hill either with threat topics, modernization issues across the DIA, probably 5-6 times. So every day there's at least 1 or 2 teams that are on the Hill having a conversation, and we have to make that investment because they're the ones who are going to ensure that these efforts are funded. They ask us lots of hard questions. They want to make sure we're not headed down proprietary lanes, and they want to know how this is solving the nation's hardest problems, but they are close partners in that way ahead. And we're working with them to make sure that they're good, strong advocates, and those staffers can explain to members as well why it is they need to spend that money to help the Department of Defense in the larger construct, which is, the eroding technological advantage we have, which is the central problem in the National Defense Strategy which the Defense Intelligence Agency plays a key role in that.
So historically in the past, I will tell you that we have not done as well a job as we could have, at least in the IT industry, talking to the Hill. Eyesight was an example where we would do certain things and we would wait, and then lobbyists would go in and get in before us. It ended up not being the greatest situation. That has changed. We have much better engagement. I've asked staffers to come to this event so that they can get an appreciation and understanding of what the complexity of this thing called DoDIIS and the DIE and what DIA is doing and how we're partnering with our IC partners and our DoD partners and our foreign partners and our commercial partners, because it's very complex. We have a staffer here today. I was very happy that he was able to make it from the HPSI to have an understanding and feed that back in. And as General Ashley said, I have taken them down to see our tech control and our data center and our comms closets and to show what I call Frankenstein equipment where I did not have the procurement authority to actually go buy a piece of equipment. Mission was impacted. We had to get it fixed. We took equipment or parts of the equipment out of equipment that was going to DRMO. It was destined for destruction. To pull that out, put it back in there to say, you know, mission reigns supreme. We're going to do what we got to do. And if you get a chance, Scott Miller's out here in the audience, and you get a chance to talk to him, you can ask what his views on that is. But I think it's a resonating message with them to actually not hear it, but just and to see it as well.
And the other piece of that is we're not just building this for the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're building this for the Defense Intelligence Enterprise. Mm-hmm. This will be provisioned and available to all the combat commands. This is for the warfighter. This will be a warfighter system, much like JWICS. JWICS is migrating to be more of a command and control network, and General Hyten said that last year at the DoDIIS conference. He goes, I see two off of JWICS. And so we're in a discussion now of, okay, well, what does JWICS need to be in the future, because it was born as a video teleconference system, and now, you know, we're funded to provision to a point, but we can't provision it as a C2 comm system. So there's a lot of work we got to do within the Department of Defense and talk about what the way ahead is for that. But everything we're talking about, all these tools, everything else, this is for the warfighter. This is for senior leaders. It is for the Hill. It is for decision advantage. And it has to scale to the entire enterprise.
So we've received several thousand questions, it appears, as I'm watching all of the emails come in.
So it was 95 hours that I made.
Yeah. Well, you're going to spend that, because I'm going to make sure every single one of those emails is forwarded to both of you before we depart, so you can respond.
I have a rule set up.
But I wanted to thank you both for the question and answer session.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you to the audience for participating. Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, guys.
I think that's it, right?
That's it, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to go off there, Tampa.
Well, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Doug Cossa. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Officer here at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Last year I had just started in this position. I'm actually on a joint detail from ODNI to DIA. And I was here only a few weeks before coming to DoDIIS. And I remember sitting in the front row thinking to myself, man, what if they asked me to speak next year? What on earth am I going to say? So here I am, trying to think about what I'm going to say. No, just kidding. So as Jack mentioned, DoDIIS is the largest technology conference in the IC, and this is our 16th year of holding it. For me, and last year I experienced this as a source for understanding how we might apply some of the most innovative ideas and capabilities to solve some of our most pressing challenges. In the simplest terms, in terms of the definition of what innovation is, it's really the intersection of new capabilities, new disciplines, and new ways of thinking. And we heard a lot of that from the director earlier. In a few minutes, we're going to break for our networking and vendor booth visits, and we're going to experience that very definition of innovation. Before we do, I'd like to leave you with a few thoughts to bring along. We hear a lot about emphasizing innovation across the IC and across the federal government. And oftentimes, we struggle with understanding what that really means. And the truth lies in the last part that I gave you of innovation, which is new ways of thinking. It's more than just thinking about what's the next big capability that we need to build. If you look throughout time, look throughout history, the most impactful innovations have actually started with paradigm shifts. So concepts like the world is flat, the earth is flat, continental shift, washing our hands to prevent the spread of disease, those are basic thinking. Those are basic concepts today that we all know and take for granted. Although the last one, I've been in this bathroom a few times, I'm not sure some of you have bought onto that yet. But we've experienced over the past several years our own paradigm shifts, right? So think back to before the internet. We were confident that the reason for collective ignorance and idiocy was because of the lack of information, lack of access to that information. And then with the rise of the internet and the advent of social media, we were actually completely wrong on that one. But in the 1990s with the internet, we were told basic concepts, right? Never talk to strangers over the internet. And we always knew from our childhood days of never get into a stranger's car. Today, we use the internet to literally summon strangers and get in their cars. And I bet that many of you did that on some portion of your travel leg today. But in the IC, if you look at our history, we've experienced our own paradigm shifts, especially over the past decade. So when I started in this community, the idea of open source as a collection discipline was actually debated. If you said the word OSINT, people would think that you weren't a collection specialist. You didn't understand how intelligence works. Today, open source is woven into the fabric of nearly everything we produce. Within the past decade, we never thought that anyone would be able to assess or produce imagery intelligence from space, let alone own the capabilities for the government to leverage. Today, NGA even hosts a conference, much like this one, to celebrate our partnership with industry. It's not as good as this one, I think we would all agree, but they try. Just kidding, just kidding. And just a mere 7 years ago, we thought that each of our intelligence agencies and services had to own, operate, and maintain its own IT infrastructure. And tomorrow, we'll hear from ICCIO John Sherman about how we're entering the third epoch of eyesight, to where we're not only sharing our infrastructure, but we're also sharing our data. And so the topic of data brings me to another aspect of innovation, booms. And what I mean by that is as technology evolves, our use of that technology evolves as well. And some of the most prominent and enduring companies throughout history actually arose during industry booms. Take, for example, the gold rush. That boom created whole industries for clothing, lodging, and tools that didn't exist before. Levi's jeans, for example, which I'm sure every one of us in this room has worn at one point in our lives, actually started by creating clothing for miners digging for gold. In the early 1980s, we actually saw another industry boom, and that was the rise of the PC. And that brought forth transformational change. And what we saw was thousands of companies entering the market to build computers. And with that, we had different models of computers, which had different ports, and printers had different ports. And it was actually a nightmare to connect those devices, for those of you that remember. And so a guy named Chet Pipkin actually saw that as an opportunity. And he didn't focus on making computers, he actually focused on the interfaces to connect them. He made the cables and other devices to actually make what you bought work. So keyboards, mice, and so forth. And he formed what today is known as the Belkin Corporation, and he took advantage of that industry boom. And with the smartphone boom in more recent years, in the past decade, Belkin took advantage of that as well. They created the cables to connect your phones, the chargers, the cases, and so forth. And today, Belkin is arguably one of the most successful tech companies of our era. Sometimes you're lucky enough to actually walk into a boom. And for me, it happened 23 years ago, almost to this day, when I was starting my freshman year of college. And I was lucky enough to save up enough money that summer, and I bought my own computer. And when I got to school, most of the students at that time used computer labs, right? With long lines to wait to get on a computer, and you had to share a printer, and it took much longer than it needed to. I had my own computer, and I was excited to hook it up to the school's network because it also meant that you had unlimited access to free music, software, movies, whatever you could think of. I, of course, didn't partake in any of that, but I know people that did. But when I bought my computer, it was missing one thing, and all computers really did at this time, and it was the network interface card to actually sync up to that network. And there was one store in town that sold these NIC cards, and they charged $100. So I went down to buy one, and I paid my $100, but you couldn't install it yourself. He said, I'll schedule an appointment to come over and install it for you. So I said, great. And I didn't know a ton about computers at the time. So he came to my dorm room a couple days later. He opened the box with the network card in it, and he popped it in the PCM slot to the motherboard, all in about 10 seconds. And he said, that'll be $250. And I thought to myself, this will never happen again. So I didn't know about computers at the time, so I started to work at the computer help desk at school. And I worked at night with another friend of mine named Rob, and we took trouble calls over the phone. But the thing was, at the help desk, if you couldn't solve it over the phone, you had to defer it to an outside vendor. Well, guess who that vendor was? The same guy that installed that network card in my computer. And that wasn't happening. So Rob and I started to take our own calls. So the next morning, we'd schedule calls, we'd go out to dorm rooms, and we'd go fix computers. And I learned a lot during that time. I also learned that was illegal. You couldn't do that because this guy had a contract with the school to be able to fix computers. So we started our own company, actually. We actually worked with a bunch of retired attorneys in Florida. They helped us get incorporated, and we joined the business environment over in the town that we were in. And we became a somewhat legitimate company. The next summer, as freshmen started to enter into their freshman year and move into their dorms, we set up a tent. And like any good college student, Rob and I took out credit cards with 20% interest rates, and we bought hundreds of Ethernet cards. And actually that day, we sold them all out. And we recruited many friends, 20 at the time, to go install all of these things throughout the course of that week to get all the other students connected to the network. And that became a fairly sizable company. And we got into new areas, new industries. We started doing network support. We spread out to other local companies, car dealerships, and so forth, to be able to build their networks and supply their computers and fix their computers. So it was a great experience of my life, and I was lucky enough to actually walk into that boom. So the question is, what's our boom now? And you've already heard from Jack and the director, and you'll hear from many on the stage throughout the week that our boom is data, and the proliferation of it and our newfound access to it. And along with that comes the infrastructure, tools, techniques produced by many of you in this room to service that boom. Data is what intelligence depends on, and it's the interface to the national security decisions that senior policymakers, warfighters, and intelligence leaders need to make. The theme of this year's DoDIIS conference, as we saw, is resiliency, redundancy, and security, adapting to asymmetric threats. And that's more than just a random compulsive smattering of Jack and I's thoughts. It's actually mostly Jack's. But it represents the need to shift our thinking as our environment changes. It represents the challenges we're faced with, and it represents the dependencies we have on the infrastructure, capabilities, the tools, and the advanced techniques to connect us. Those are the very topics presented at the DoDIIS conference this week. And in a few minutes, we're going to depart to the vendor floor, and we're actually going to see those capabilities firsthand. Technology is more integrated than how we do business today than ever before, hence this year's theme. So as we depart to the vendor floor and break for our network socials, ask yourself, how are we shifting our thinking? And what are the opportunities to best service this boom? When we depart and come back at 10:55 to take our seats, we're going to also hear from Major General John Howard, who is our Deputy Director for Commonwealth Integration. You heard both Jack and the Director talk about the importance of interfacing with our Five Eyes international partners. That's another boom that's on our horizon, of creating those capabilities to more closely interact and collaborate. So please come back, take your seats at 10:55, and we'll introduce Major General John Howard. Thank you.